let's be joined by Jon Machota here of The Athletic, the man who covers the Dallas Cowboys. John, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. I'm just thinking about this life that you live where you're not on that app. I don't have that benefit, so it does sound nice.
It's so delightful, John. You should try it. Listen, Deion and Jerry chatted. You know, what do we got here? Obviously, I'm sure Deion's numbers and Jerry's cell phone. What happened here, John? What's going on?
I don't think either of these two gentlemen have it in their DNA to shoot down any type of interest like this. And so I think they both enjoy it quite a bit. I still think that would be an extreme long shot for both. I don't know that Deion really wants to coach in the NFL, at least not right now. I do think he enjoys what he has going in Boulder. But with Jerry, you know, we've asked Jerry several times over the last couple of years about Deion, obviously when he's having the success that he's had in college. And while Jerry's a lot of praise for Deion, no question, and Jerry's impressed with what he's been able to do at the college level, Jerry would always come back to one of the best things that Deion's able to bring to the college game is the recruiting side of it, and that there's no match for him as a recruiter. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But Jerry would also point out that that doesn't really help you in the NFL because there really isn't the recruiting. And especially Jerry didn't say this, but many of us that cover the team will say this. The Cowboys aren't even a team that does much in free agency where maybe even recruiting would even factor in. So some of his strengths, I don't know how that they would fit other than the fact that he's a huge name. And it just would be fascinating to have someone who would be as big of a kind of into the media and loving the media as much as Jerry does. So I would just be fascinated to see post game where you have Jerry talking and Deion at the same time, and people like myself would have to choose where we would go. I don't think the Cowboys have had a coach like that really since Bill Parcells.
I would agree with that, John. And one thing that I will offer a little pushback on is, yes, obviously, you know, Deion does like being talked about sometimes, not all the time. And he does have a sense of showmanship and does seem to welcome in the conversation about him when it's time. But I don't know if this getting out actually is helpful to him. I mean, in the world of college, you know, there's portals at any time. And if somebody thinks Deion's got a foot out the door, I don't think that helps him in the Colorado Buffaloes one bit. You know, and he's already Deion is Deion no matter whether the Cowboys are interested in him, right? I mean, I don't know how that puts more of a feather in Deion's cap that the Cowboys would consider him as head coaching material. I think everybody considers him head coaching material. In a way, this does benefit the Cowboys to tell fans that would want something like this to happen, and that includes our mutual friend Michael Irvin, who has come out and basically told Jerry to do this on Netflix before the touching of gloves, if you want to call it that, between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, that it kind of helps say, hey, Cowboys fans, I hear you. We're kicking over every possibility, including Deion. John.
Well, and that also helps because of the fact that this isn't a next, not to say that every hiring cycle has tons of big names, but when you take away a Bill Belichick, I mean, the biggest name that's probably left out there is Ben Johnson, who's never been a head coach, but he seems to be the clear favorite that most teams would be interested in having his services. Well, his name is nowhere near the level of a Deion Sanders. And so for this to be the first name that surfaces the same day that Jerry decides to part ways with Mike McCarthy, I just don't think that – I get where you're saying about the Deion thing, and that makes total sense, especially from the recruiting aspect. It doesn't help you to have this in the news. But it makes total sense from Jerry's side to where even Jerry could be thinking, there's no chance I'm hiring Deion Sanders. But, you know, I'm in the news right now. I love it. I love to stir it up. I love when they're talking about me. Let me throw out I'll get something out there of the biggest name that you could possibly have. Even though I don't really think I'm going to go that route, I don't think you could go bigger than Deion Sanders.
Jon Machota of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. Before we continue on the road of who's next, let's linger on why McCarthy and the Cowboys parted ways, John. What happened in the days between the final game of the regular season and Monday?
Well, I think that you also have to you have to go back, I think it's a year to this day, that Green Bay lost, just because of what the team was set up for. The Cowboys, like I said, they don't do much in the offseason to add talent from other teams, but they certainly, to their level, they felt like they were going all in when they traded for Brandon Cooks and Stephon Gilmore. They felt like that team last year was set up to really make a deep playoff run. They were great at home, winning 16 in a row. And then to lay the egg they did to get destroyed by the Packers as the 7 seed. Cowboys were a 7-point favorite in that game. That's where everything kind of started, because if it's not for that game, I think McCarthy gets a contract extension at that point and doesn't have to kind of coach in this last year for his job. And so things obviously didn't go well this season. You could certainly make the argument there's a lot of residual effects from that Packers loss, particularly at the start of this season. The first 5 or 6 games they played at home, the way they were just destroyed by teams, including like the Saints, who aren't even on that type of a level. I think things started to fall apart there. Then the injuries, key injuries to guys like Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, that obviously didn't make it any better. And so I think Jerry wanted to give Mike every opportunity to try and, maybe slip in the back door of the playoffs and get hot at the right time. And when that didn't happen, I don't think Jerry was committed to going long-term. And I think Mike wanted another, similar deal to what he got last time, 5 years, but probably a lot more money than I think he was making $8 million on this last one, especially when you think of what some of the top coaches are making. And I think that was the sticking point, but they never from everything I've heard, they have not gotten into a actual numbers and years discussion at depth. And I think that's what ultimately got even Mike McCarthy to be like, all right, it's just best that we go in different directions because this thing isn't going anywhere.
So is McCarthy who walked first, who balked and then walked? That's your general sense of things?
I think what happened is, I think Jerry was dragging it out, and I think Mike read that, this probably isn't going in a direction where we're going to come to agreement. And so why drag this thing out any longer? I think it's just best we just go our separate ways, because Jerry dragged it out with Jason Garrett, even though at the end of 2019 season, you knew he wasn't going to bring Jason back. And that went over a week until they finally made an announcement that they would go in another direction. And so I think that Jerry probably wanted Mike back, but only for maybe a year or two. And I don't think that Mike was interested in that at all.
And when you say Jerry dragging it out, boy, have we heard that before, John. You know what I mean? And I just kind of feel you're going to be the latest person where I ask you a psychoanalytic question about Jerry Jones and his way of doing business. Why? Why do you think it is? As someone who covers and someone who listens and somebody who pokes around, what's your analysis of why Jerry Jones drags things out to the last possible second, John?
Well, the number one thing is definitely he likes the Cowboys always being talked about. And so when you get things done in advance, then everybody just knows what to expect and you just go on with your day. And you see that with a lot of the top organizations, whether you talk about Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Green Bay, and there's obviously several others, but that's just not the Cowboys' way, not under Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones likes to keep things out there. He likes everyone to be talking about them. And while he loves to say that he has a high tolerance for ambiguity, which he said many a times even after last Sunday's loss to Washington, you have to sit there and go, well, that doesn't mean everybody else feels the same way. It certainly wasn't best for CeeDee Lamb for that contract extension to be dragged out and him not be at training camp. It doesn't appear that was the best thing to wait a couple hours before the season opener to give Dak his new contract. The way that they don't do anything in free agency and kind of drag it out like that they're just going to find some bargains during camp or right before the season starts. The thinking is just not there that's lined up with the top winning organizations in this sport. And it's safe to think if a fan or a reporter or anybody well, you're the most valued franchise. Like the expectation should be that you're getting the absolute best and you're doing the absolute best. And that really isn't the case with the Dallas Cowboys. That's why it's been 29 years since they've won a Super Bowl. But Jerry loves, like he says, he loves to stir it up. When things get a little quiet, he loves to stir it up. And so like right now, he's gonna milk this whole coaching search thing for all that it's worth. And it doesn't even mean that it's going to lead to the best candidate, but it's going to keep the Cowboys in the news cycle. And Jerry loves that.
A few minutes left with Jon Machota of The Athletic, covers the Dallas Cowboys. So walk me through the timeline and who's on the list and good luck trying to figure out this labyrinth of deadlines and when you could talk to somebody in person or when you can Zoom to somebody based on whether they're still in the playoffs or not. Walk me through, best of your knowledge, the timeline and who's on the list for Jerry Jones and the rest of the group to talk to here.
I think it's without question the most difficult of the head coaching openings to predict. And that's just because there isn't an obvious name. Again, when I talk about that loss to the Packers, there was many who thought they should have went in another direction after that loss. And all the top names that would have been out there, Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, they didn't have any significant interest in them then. So when this cycle was coming back through, it's not like the Cowboys just barely missed the playoffs. The writing was on the wall early in this season that was going in the wrong direction, that there was a good chance there'd be a new head coach. But there is no leader in the clubhouse at all. A lot of people point to Kellen Moore because obviously he's been in the building, former player, great relationship with Dak. He's called the plays. But I don't know how he would fit in his first time as a head coach, being that in the spotlight of the Dallas Cowboys. And so I don't think that's the slam dunk. Ben Johnson makes a ton of sense, but Ben Johnson is probably going to get paid at the top of the market. And as I say, the Cowboys, you see the valuations all the time, $10 billion, $10.1 billion, $10.2 billion. They don't spend on coaches like a team that's the most valuable franchise in sports. So that's why Ben Johnson doesn't make a lot of sense. But then also you can't close the door on some people that other teams wouldn't consider. And the number one on that list would be Jason Witten. He hasn't coached in the NFL. He hasn't coached in college, but he has a great relationship with Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones thinks very highly of him. Jerry Jones has made comparisons between what Dan Campbell's done in Detroit to Jason Witten. Obviously, both were former tight ends that played for the Dallas Cowboys. I can certainly see Jason Witten being a good head coach in the NFL. I certainly think he could work well with Jerry Jones, but not having any coaching experience, that just doesn't make a lot of sense either. When Jerry's not really in a spot where he can have a young coach kind of just learn on the job. He needs someone that comes in and can win right away, especially with the investments he's made in Dak and CD and will make in Micah Parsons. So that's not an obvious choice either. So then that brings you to the Pete Carrolls, the Jon Grudens, and Ron Rivera's. And I don't know that any of those are a slam dunk pick either. And I'll just wrap up my thought on that by saying this. I don't think Jerry Jones even knows definitively right now who he wants to be their next head coach. And that's kind of scary.
What about Belichick?
Again, I go back to just them not wanting to spend the money. So when I see a $10 million buyout, that gives me pause. But then also the fact of, you could have had Bill last offseason. You could have talked to Bill throughout this season when things were going in the wrong direction and be like, hey, we're really interested in you. We want to talk to you, but we're going to give Mike the rest of the season to coach this season out. I mean, Bill has spoke very highly of Jerry and Stephen Jones. He knows them very well. There certainly could have been back channeling there, but from everything I've heard, that never happened. And that's why, Bill didn't have a lot of interest. And that's why he took the North Carolina job. So I think that one's unlikely as well.
Dude. Wow. So no idea, huh? Zero. There's no sense. And Deion, you think is just two guys who talk to one another. Somebody leaked it out and they're just cool with having it talked about. That's what you're saying.
Yes, and I think Jerry will keep playing that one up until he does identify who his next head coach is. And, kind of going to your earlier point of why things take so long with Jerry too, I think as he gets older, I think there's a lot more of him listening a lot more to people around him and taking in what they say, whether it be Stephen Jones, whether it be Will McClay, whether maybe former coaches and people in the league that he's known for a long time that he bounces ideas off of. And I think there could be a part where he's maybe not as decisive as he used to be. It's interesting that Netflix documentary is coming out. That's, the headline of it is that it's called The Gambler, Jerry Jones. And Jerry Jones hasn't been a gambler for a while in the NFL, well over a decade since he's done real big gambles. And so that's why I kind of lean towards a more conservative approach. And that's why you can't shut the door on like a Pete Carroll or someone, or like even a Mike Tomlin if he was to become available. I just think Jerry's going to really try and target someone that has previous NFL head coaching experience.
Did you watch Landman, John? You watch it?
I haven't, but I saw Jerry's scene, and I can tell you I've been around Jerry Jones, and that doesn't even seem like that was acting. That is legit. That seemed like Jerry Jones, how he talks about family and that. But yeah, I haven't got a chance to start it yet.
But no, but you saw the scene. Do you know any of the backstory? How he got involved? Is Taylor Sheridan the next head coach of the Cowboys? I mean, what do we got for me, John, on that one?
Well,
anything?
If you have anything to do with the oil and drilling business, Jerry Jones is obviously someone that's good to consult with, and I know that he has relationships, with people involved with that. And Jerry loves the whole TV side of it. And so because of that, it doesn't surprise me that he's involved in that and that him and Taylor Sheridan talk. There was a schedule release a few years ago for the Cowboys. I believe Taylor Sheridan was involved. So they definitely have a good relationship. He's been to Cowboys games before. And so I think it's just a natural fit. And certainly with that topic, it makes complete sense. And even with the topic that Jerry's talking about in that scene right there, I can see it being one of those things where he's talked about it with Taylor Sheridan, with other people with the show, and they were like, man, that's great. We should try and work that in to an episode, because just the way Jerry was talking about his family and the way he was tearing up like that, I've been around him several times when he's had very similar conversations. So I could understand how they could be like, we're just going to let the camera roll, just have a natural conversation, and we'll use the best stuff, and ended up using all of it.
John, appreciate the time. Let's do this again soon, as obviously you're going to be very busy finding out what is going on at the Star, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it. It's Jon Machota of The Athletic right here on The Rich Eisen Show, covering the Dallas Cowboys and Paramount Plus. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.